Welcome to my channel. What if I told you that one man created a universe full of heroes that inspired millions, and he did it with just a pen, paper, and his wild imagination? Would you keep watching? Because today, we're talking about the man behind Spider-Man, Iron Man, and the Avengers. Yes, this is the incredible story of Stan Lee. And trust me, you don't want to miss this one. Chapter 1. The Boy Who Loved Stories. Stan Lee was not born a superhero. He didn't have a mask or a cape or any special powers. But what he did have was imagination. He was born as Stanley Martin Lieber on December 28, 1922, in New York City. His parents were Jewish immigrants from Romania, and like many families during that time, they were very poor. His father worked as a dress cutter, but he didn't have regular work. Life was not easy. The family lived in a small apartment, and young Stanley had to sleep on a fold-out couch in the living room. But even though life was tough, something magical was happening inside his mind. Stanley loved to read. He read everything he could find: books, newspapers, adventure magazines. He especially loved Sherlock Holmes, Robin Hood, and Jules Verne. These stories opened a new world for him, a world full of heroes, action, and big ideas. He didn't just read for fun. He learned from these stories. He learned how to build suspense. He learned how to create characters people care about. And most of all, he learned how powerful stories could be. As a teenager, Stanley dreamed of becoming a famous writer. He often said he wanted to write the great American novel one day. But times were hard, and he needed to work. So when he was only 17, with the help of a family friend, he got a job as an assistant at a comic book company called Timely Publications. It wasn't a glamorous job. At first, he just filled ink bottles, brought coffee, and erased pencil marks from the pages after the artists finished drawing. But young Stanley was watching, learning, and waiting for his chance. That chance came faster than he expected. One day, the editor of the company suddenly left, and since there was no one else, Stanley, still just a teenager, was asked to write a comic story. It was just a 2-page filler, but he took it seriously. He wanted to sound more mature, so instead of signing his real name, Stanley Lieber, he used a pen name. He called himself Stan Lee. He thought he would save his real name for the serious writing he planned to do later. Little did he know that pen name would become famous all over the world. Stan's first story appeared in a Captain America comic in 1941. And just like that, Stan Lee became a comic book writer. He was excited, but also a little embarrassed. Back then, comics were not respected. People thought they were just for kids. They didn't see comics as real literature. Even Stan felt that way sometimes. He once said he was almost ashamed to tell people what he did. But still, he kept writing, because deep inside, he loved it. He loved the action, the humor, the adventure. He believed that stories, any stories, could make a difference. Then came World War II. In 1942, Stan joined the U.S. Army. But instead of fighting with weapons, he used his words. He worked in a special unit that created training films and posters for soldiers. He was even given a unique title: playwright. That's right, Stan Lee, the comic book guy, was officially a playwright for the U.S. Army. He wrote stories to teach, to inspire, and to entertain the troops. It wasn't the battlefield, but it mattered. And Stan learned something important during that time. Even in war, storytelling had power. After the war, Stan returned to the comic book world. But the industry was changing. Superheroes were becoming less popular, and publishers were trying everything: romance comics, horror comics, westerns. Stan wrote all kinds of stories, but after many years, he started to feel stuck. He was tired. He was thinking about quitting. He even told his wife, Joan, that he didn't want to keep writing stories he didn't care about. But she said something that changed everything. She told him, "Why don't you write one comic the way you really want to write it? The worst that can happen is they fire you. But at least you'll have written something you're proud of." That advice, that one small push, would lead to something big. Something that would change not just Stan's life, but the entire world of comics. And that is where the real adventure begins. Chapter 2: How Comics Were Born and Laughed At. In the early days of comic books, people didn't take them seriously. They were seen as cheap entertainment for children, funny little stories with silly drawings. Most adults thought they were a waste of time. They didn't see the creativity or the imagination or the power behind those pages. But Stan Lee saw something different. He saw a way to tell big stories in a small space. And he believed that comics could be more than just laughs and explosions. They could be meaningful. When Stan started working at Timely Comics in the 1940s, superheroes were still a new idea. Superman had only been around for a few years. Batman was just beginning. Comics were full of action, but the characters were often one-dimensional. They were strong, brave, and perfect, but they didn't feel real. Stan was just an assistant at the time, but he was watching everything closely. He was learning how stories were made. He paid attention to the way artists drew emotions, how dialogue helped move the story, and how each page created rhythm, like music. Stan's early writing days weren't always fun. He wrote stories quickly, under pressure, and sometimes even under fake names. The industry moved fast. Sometimes writers didn't even get credit. And because comics were so cheap to print, nobody expected high quality. It was just a business. But everything changed during World War II. Suddenly, superheroes were not just for fun. They became symbols of hope. Characters like Captain America were punching Hitler on the covers. Soldiers read comics in their free time. Kids looked up to these heroes. Comics started to feel important. They were simple, yes, but powerful. Stan was part of that movement. And even though he was young, his stories started reaching thousands of readers. He was giving people something to believe in. Still, after the war ended, things got hard again. The superhero genre began to lose its popularity. By the 1950s, people were turning to other types of stories: romance, horror, crime, even westerns. Stan had to adapt. He wrote all kinds of comics. One day it was a love story, the next it was a monster tale. But inside, he wasn't happy. The work felt empty. He wanted to write something real, something that had meaning, something he could be proud of. And then something strange happened. A new company, DC Comics, became successful again with a superhero team called the Justice League, a group that included Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and more. It was selling well. People were excited about heroes again. Stan's boss at Timely, which had now changed its name to Atlas Comics, noticed the success. He came to Stan and said, "We need our own superhero team. Can you create one?" Now remember, Stan was tired. He was about to quit. But his wife, Joan, reminded him of something important. If you're going to leave anyway, why not write the story the way you want to write it? No rules, no limits, just be yourself. That one moment, just a few words, set everything in motion. Stan sat down with Jack Kirby, one of the most talented artists in the industry. Together, they created a new kind of superhero team. Not perfect, not always brave, and definitely not always happy. These heroes had problems. They argued. They had emotions. They made mistakes. But they always tried to do the right thing. And that's how the Fantastic Four was born in 1961. They weren't just heroes. They were like a family. They fought aliens and monsters, yes, but they also fought with each other. They had real personalities. And readers loved it. The comic was a huge hit. Stan had finally found his voice. He had written something from the heart, and it worked. This was the beginning of something much bigger. Stan saw that comics didn't have to be silly. They could be deep. They could be smart. They could deal with real issues: fear, love, anger, jealousy, responsibility. He realized he could reach people, not just kids, but adults too. This was the start of the Marvel Age of comics. But Stan wasn't done. He was just getting started. The Fantastic Four were only the beginning. Soon he would create even more heroes, ones that would change the world forever. Chapter 3: The Birth of Marvel Superheroes. After the success of the Fantastic Four in 1961, something changed inside Stan Lee. For the first time in years, he felt excited again. He had written a comic the way he wanted to, full of heart, humor, and human problems. And people loved it. The fans were writing letters. Kids, teenagers, even adults were saying, "These characters feel real." Stan knew he was onto something big, and he didn't stop. In fact, this was just the beginning of something that would soon take over the world. Now that he had found his new style, Stan started creating more heroes, faster than ever before. But these weren't like the old-style superheroes who were perfect and serious all the time. Stan's heroes were different. They had emotions. They had fears. They had struggles. Some even had problems with money, school, or their families, just like the readers themselves. And that's why people connected with them. The next big creation was Spider-Man. And the story behind it is almost as amazing as the hero himself. Stan had this crazy idea. What if a superhero was just a teenager? Not a sidekick like Robin, but the main hero. And what if he didn't want to be a hero at all? What if he just wanted a normal life? But life wouldn't let him. Stan took this idea to his boss, but the boss said no. He said, "Teenagers can't be heroes. They can only be sidekicks." He said, "People hate spiders." He said, "It's a terrible idea." But Stan didn't give up. He had one last chance. There was a comic book called Amazing Fantasy, and it was about to be canceled. No one cared what was in the final issue. So Stan put Spider-Man in it. just to see what would happen. And guess what? That comic sold like crazy. Readers loved Spider-Man. They loved Peter Parker, a shy high school kid who lived with his aunt, got bullied at school, worried about money, and still tried to save people, even when it was hard. He was just like them. He was human, and that made him heroic. Spider-Man became a hit, a big one, and it gave Stan the freedom to create even more heroes. With artist Jack Kirby, Stan created the Hulk, a man who turns into a monster when he's angry. The idea came from classic stories like Frankenstein and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But Stan added something new. Bruce Banner didn't want to be the Hulk. He was afraid of himself. It was a story about inner conflict, about fighting the monster inside. Next came Thor, the Norse god of thunder. But even a god had problems in a Stan Lee story. Thor struggled with pride and love. He wasn't perfect, and that made him interesting. Then came Iron Man, a rich, smart man named Tony Stark, who builds a powerful suit after being injured in war. But he has a weak heart and a lot of guilt. It was a story about power, technology, and responsibility. Stan was showing that even rich and powerful people had pain inside. And there were more. Doctor Strange, a magician with a tragic past. Daredevil, a blind lawyer who uses his other senses to fight crime. And then, the X-Men. Now the X-Men were different. They were a group of young mutants born with special powers. But society feared them. People hated them for being different. It was a story about discrimination, about fear, about being treated unfairly for something you couldn't control. Many readers saw themselves in those characters. The X-Men taught readers that being different wasn't something to be ashamed of. It could be your greatest strength. All of this happened in just a few years. It was like a storm of creativity. Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, and other artists were working day and night, creating what we now call the Marvel Universe. And the amazing thing was, these characters all lived in the same world. They could meet each other, team up, even argue. That had never been done before in comics. It made everything feel bigger, more alive, more connected. Stan Lee also started writing in a different way. He used something called the Marvel method. Instead of writing a full script, he would tell the artist the basic idea and the artist would draw the scenes. Then Stan would go back and write the dialogue. It gave the artists more freedom, and it made the comics feel more dynamic and full of energy. Another thing Stan did was talk directly to the readers. In the back of the comics, he would write letters, jokes, and updates in a fun, friendly voice. He made fans feel like they were part of something special. A club, a family, a movement. He called them true believers and signed off with his famous word, Excelsior. Stan Lee had changed comics forever. He didn't just create heroes. He created a world where anyone, no matter how ordinary, could become extraordinary. A world where pain and power lived side by side. A world where imagination had no limits. And this world was just getting started. Chapter 4. Fame, Power, and a Bit of Trouble. By the mid-1960s, Stan Lee had become more than just a comic book writer. He was becoming a star. People knew his name. They read his editorials. They laughed at his jokes. and they waited every month to see what new character he would come up with next. Comics were no longer just for kids. They were cool. They were smart. And a big part of that was because of Stan. At Marvel Comics, everything was moving fast. The company was growing. The fan letters were pouring in. Stan was writing or editing almost every comic. He gave interviews, visited schools, and appeared on radio shows. Fans loved him not just for his stories, but for his energy and personality. He spoke like a friend, not like a boss. He made people feel included. He made comic books fun. And Marvel kept growing. The Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, the Hulk, Iron Man, Thor, Daredevil, Doctor Strange, the X-Men, they were all selling well. Readers loved the shared universe, the deep stories, the surprising crossovers. Characters from different comics would meet, talk, argue, and sometimes fight. It made the world of Marvel feel real, like anything could happen. But behind the scenes, not everything was perfect. Stan Lee was becoming the face of Marvel. His name was everywhere. He was the one doing interviews, speaking to fans, and getting the attention. But many of the artists, like Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko, felt left out. They believed they had created these characters with Stan, not just for him. And they were right. The truth is, Marvel's magic was built by teams, not just one man. But over time, people started saying, Stan Lee created Spider-Man, or Stan Lee made the Marvel Universe, and they forgot the artists. This caused some serious tension. Jack Kirby, who helped create the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, Thor, Iron Man, the Hulk, and more, felt he wasn't getting the respect or credit he deserved. The same thing happened with Steve Ditko, the artist who brought Spider-Man to life on the page. Ditko eventually left Marvel. So did Kirby. They were tired of feeling like their work was being ignored. Stan always said he never wanted to take credit alone. In many interviews, he praised the artists. He said, "Without Jack Kirby, there is no Marvel Universe." But the fans and the media often focused only on Stan. And whether it was fair or not, it created a lot of hard feelings. At the same time, Marvel Comics was being bought and sold by different companies. New owners came in. They wanted to make money. They wanted to control the business. Stan, who had once written comics just for fun, now had to deal with lawyers, contracts, deadlines, and office politics. It wasn't just about stories anymore. It was about profits, brands, and big decisions. Still, Stan kept working. He became more of an editor and less of a writer. He started managing other writers and artists. He worked on expanding Marvel into television, radio, and even cartoons. He wanted Marvel to be more than comics. He wanted it to be a universe that lived in every home. In 1972, Stan Lee stopped writing monthly comics and became publisher of Marvel. It was a big job, and it showed how much the company trusted him. He gave speeches, appeared at comic conventions, and kept spreading the Marvel message. Even though he wasn't writing every comic anymore, his voice was still everywhere. And fans still loved him. In the 1980s, Stan moved to Hollywood. His dream was to bring Marvel characters to the big screen. He wanted to see Spider-Man swinging through the city in live action. He wanted the X-Men and the Avengers in theaters around the world. But it was hard. Technology wasn't ready. Studios didn't understand superheroes. Many early Marvel movie projects failed or were never made at all. It was frustrating. Stan had created some of the most popular characters in the world, but the world still didn't see their full power. And there were more challenges. Some people still questioned how much credit Stan really deserved. Was he the mastermind, or just the man in the spotlight? The arguments continued. Even after decades, the truth was hard to see clearly. One thing was sure, though. Without Stan Lee, Marvel would not be what it is today. Through all the ups and downs, Stan kept going. He smiled in public. He kept telling stories. He believed in the power of imagination. He believed that anyone could be a hero, even a shy kid, even a troubled scientist, even someone who felt invisible. Stan once said, "I used to be embarrassed because I was just a comic book writer while other people were building bridges or going on to medical careers. And then I began to realize, entertainment is one of the most important things in people's lives. Without it, they might go off the deep end. I feel that if you're able to entertain people, you're doing a good thing." That was his mission: to entertain, to inspire, to make people feel something. And though he had already changed the comic book world, he still had one dream left: to bring Marvel to life on the big screen. And that dream was about to come true. Chapter 5. From Comics to the Big Screen. For many years, Stan Lee had one big dream: to see his Marvel characters come alive. Not just in comic books, but on movie screens around the world. He believed that these stories could be just as powerful, just as emotional, and just as fun as any Hollywood blockbuster. But back in the 1980s and 1990s, that dream was harder than anyone expected. At first, nobody in Hollywood took superheroes seriously. Studios thought comic books were just for kids. They didn't understand the stories. They didn't believe people would pay to see a man in a costume flying or fighting a giant robot. And the few superhero movies that did get made, like the early Captain America or Fantastic Four films, were cheap, low quality, and often never even released in theaters. It was disappointing. Stan had created a whole universe full of powerful characters, but nobody seemed to see the magic that readers had loved for years. Still, Stan didn't give up. He kept pitching ideas to studios. He appeared at comic conventions, telling fans that someday Marvel heroes would be on the big screen. He believed it with all his heart. In the meantime, Marvel focused more on cartoons and TV shows. In the 1990s, shows like X-Men, the animated series, and Spider-Man, the animated series became popular, especially with kids. They were fun, exciting, and told serious stories about family, fear, and responsibility. These cartoons were a small step toward something bigger. Then, in the early 2000s, everything changed. In 2000, the movie X-Men was released in theaters. It was the first time a Marvel film had a big budget, real actors, and serious attention from Hollywood. And it was a hit. People loved it. The story was about more than just powers. It was about being different, about being rejected by society, and still choosing to fight for good. The same message that Stan had written years ago was now being heard on the big screen. 2 years later, in 2002, Spider-Man hit theaters. Directed by Sam Raimi and starring Tobey Maguire, the movie was a huge success. It broke box office records. People cheered. Some even cried. The story of Peter Parker, a regular boy who gets powers, loses his uncle, and learns that with great power comes great responsibility, was now known around the world. And guess who appeared in the movie? Yes, Stan Lee himself. He didn't have a big role, just a small scene where he helped someone during an attack. But fans noticed, and they loved it. That small cameo became a tradition. Every time a Marvel movie came out, fans would look for Stan. Was he a librarian? A bus driver? A man in the background reading a newspaper? It became a game. And each time it reminded people, Stan was still part of this universe. Even if he wasn't writing the comics anymore, his spirit was everywhere. After Spider-Man, more Marvel heroes arrived. Daredevil, the Hulk, Fantastic Four, and more. Some of the movies were good, some not so good. But Marvel was getting closer. The dream was alive. And then, in 2008, something incredible happened. Marvel decided to make its own movies, not just sell the rights to other studios, but do it all themselves. The first movie they made was Iron Man, starring Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark. It was a risk. Iron Man was not as famous as Spider-Man or the X-Men, but the movie was smart, exciting, and full of heart. And at the very end, in a short scene after the credits, a new character appeared. Nick Fury, played by Samuel L. Jackson. He said just one sentence, "I'm here to talk to you about the Avenger Initiative." And with that, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, MCU, was born. What came next was a series of connected movies. Thor, Captain America, The Avengers, Guardians of the Galaxy, Black Panther, Doctor Strange, Ant-Man, and so many more. Each one was tied to the next. Characters grew, changed, made mistakes, and worked together. It was storytelling on a massive scale, and it all came from the characters Stan Lee and his team had created decades earlier. And yes, Stan was there in every single one. Fans watched closely just to see his cameos. Sometimes funny, sometimes touching, always surprising. It became a tradition, a symbol, a moment of joy in every movie. Stan Lee wasn't just a writer anymore. He was a legend. The Marvel movies became some of the most successful films in history. Avengers: Endgame, released in 2019, became the highest-grossing movie of all time. It was a celebration of everything Marvel had built. And even though Stan had passed away just before the movie came out, his presence was still there. His final cameo was filmed before he died. And when fans saw him on screen one last time, many of them cried. Because they knew what he meant. Stan Lee wasn't just the creator of superheroes. He was the man who taught the world that anyone can be a hero. That strength comes in many forms. That being different is not a weakness. And that stories, if told with love, can last forever. Chapter 6: The Legacy of a True Superhero. Stan Lee passed away on November 12, 2018, at the age of 95. The world was heartbroken. Fans, actors, artists, and writers from all around the globe paid tribute to him. Social media was filled with messages. People were thanking Stan for creating the characters that shaped their childhood, helped them through dark times, and taught them how to believe in themselves. But even though he was gone, it didn't feel like he had truly left us. Because Stan Lee had done something rare. something powerful. He created a universe that still lives on. His stories didn't end with him. In fact, they keep growing every year in new movies, new comics, new games, and in the hearts of millions of fans who continue to be inspired by the characters he helped create. And the best part? Stan never wanted to be famous. He never imagined he would become a global icon. All he wanted was to write, to entertain, to connect with people. And that's exactly what he did, better than almost anyone else. You see, Stan didn't just create superheroes. He created a way of thinking. He taught us that a hero can be anyone. A teenage boy with anxiety, a blind lawyer, a scientist with anger issues, a girl from space, a man with a broken heart inside a suit of armor. Stan showed us that behind every mask there is a person, a real person, someone with problems, feelings, and fears, just like us. He also believed that comics, and stories in general, should talk about the real world. Racism, war, poverty, power, greed, fear. In the 1960s and 70s, Stan used his comics to talk about civil rights and human rights. The X-Men, for example, were not just about powers. They were about being different, being rejected, being hated for who you are. Stan wanted people to think, to feel, to see the world in a new way. He didn't preach. He didn't lecture. He told stories. And through those stories, he opened minds. In one of his most famous essays, called Stan's Soapbox, he wrote, "Bigotry and racism are among the deadliest social ills plaguing the world today. If we're to survive, we must learn to live together in peace and with respect for one another." Those weren't just words. That was his mission, to make the world a little better with every story. Stan's legacy is also in the diversity of the Marvel Universe. Today, we have superheroes from every background. Black Panther, Ms. Marvel, Shang-Chi, Miles Morales, and many more. Stan may not have created all of them himself, but without his early work, they wouldn't exist. He opened the door. He lit the way. And let's not forget those famous Stan Lee cameos, his tiny roles in every Marvel movie. They were short, funny, and unexpected, but they were more than just jokes. They were a reminder. The man behind the stories is still watching, still smiling, still a part of it all. Even now, years after his death, Stan Lee's words are quoted everywhere. His characters are more popular than ever. His comics are studied in universities. His movies are loved by people of all ages from every country in the world. But maybe the most important thing he gave us was hope. Hope that one person can make a difference. That imagination has power. That stories can change lives. And that being a hero doesn't mean being perfect. It means trying. It means caring. It means standing up for others even when it's hard. Stan Lee may not have worn a cape. He didn't have super strength. He couldn't fly. But he gave the world something just as powerful: inspiration. He inspired generations of writers, artists, filmmakers, and dreamers. People who, thanks to Stan, learned to believe in something bigger, to believe in themselves. And if you're watching this today, if you've ever felt like you're not strong enough, not good enough, or not ready, you should remember what Stan taught us. Heroes are not born, they are made. One choice at a time, one action at a time. And anyone, yes, anyone can be a hero.